Hey everybody, great to have you back here in the fish tank. It's time for our Minion Masters patch notes video, and this is going to be for version 2.9, and this is going to be kind of a little bit of an end of an era. This is going to be the last content patch for Minion Masters, at least for the time being. If you've been following along with all the stuff that's been going on, you know that the devs are not going to be continuing with new content for the game. So unfortunately, no new cards, no new perks, no new skins. Well, there will be some new skins, but not for very long. So that's kind of disappointing, right? But we've got to try and make the best of it. The game will continue as long as it makes enough money to pay for the servers. The game will continue. There's going to be monthly balance patches, which will be community driven. So if you want to get your say when it comes to these balance changes, make sure you join the Minion Masters Discord. There'll be a link in the description, and you can have your suggestions for balance changes that you're thinking about, or maybe support other people's balance suggestions. Okay, so what are we going to go through today? We're going to go through what is going to be in this new patch, but before we go, let me just remind you, a lot of people are not subscribed to my channel. It really does help if you hit that subscribe button, if you're enjoying the content and want to carry along, because as long as Minions is existing, Fishy will be here playing it and making content. So smash that subscribe. Right, let's dive into version 2.9. Right, this is going to be the star of the show, and we'll find out about him shortly. But version 2.9 is going to be Moonstruck. It's going to be an accursed ascension, all around kind of werewolves. It's going to be dropping Tuesday the 29th of October. If you're watching this on the YouTube premiere with me, welcome, and that will be tomorrow. So we're going to have a new season pass with the new card, 2 new alt perks, and some new cosmetics, not a new skin. Balance changes and some bug fixes, but they're going to be sort of non-gameplay bug fixes. So let's find out about the new card. This guy is going to be called the Revenant. Well, what does he do? Let's find out. So the Revenant is an accursed minion. You can see he's kind of like a big scary werewolf. 8 mana, does a lot of damage, 70 damage every 1.1 seconds. So solid DPS, 400 health. So those are his base stats, but he has a special sort of ability. When you spawn him, he marks an opponent, and that is called Marked for Death, and it will have a little icon above it, sort of a little swipe icon of his claws. Now, the unit he will mark is the one with the maximum health. The highest maximum health. So not current health, highest maximum health. Has to be at least 300. So if the opponent doesn't have anything above 300, then nothing gets marked. If they do, then the one with the highest maximum health does get marked. So reminder, maximum health, which is their starting health, not their current health. But what does the Marked for Death do? Well, a couple of things. Firstly, on all of the Revenant's attacks, his first attack against a target will fear that target. So kind of like how Stun Lancers, their first attack stuns a target, his first attack against all targets will fear them. It's only a fear of the one, it's not an AoE fear. But if that target is the Marked for Death one, not only will he fear it, he will root that target as well. So the target will be feared, meaning it can't attack, and it will be rooted, meaning it can't run away. One thing that it doesn't really mention here on the card is the card that is Marked for Death, the minion that is Marked for Death, will effectively have a taunt on it, but only for the Revenant. So this guy will be taunted towards whoever he's Marked for Death. So if he's attacking a load of stuff together, as long as he's within the taunt minion, which is, the taunt range, which isn't huge, but the same as normal taunt, then he will prioritize attacking that minion. Now, if he kills the Marked for Death minion, he gets a huge buff. So he'll gain Rage, Haste, and Heal for 200. Werewolves are fast. This guy's got a speed of 10. A hasted werewolf is very, very fast indeed. So basically the idea is to use him to kill the unit that is Marked for Death and to get a buff on him. And reminder, the Marked for Death is based on the unit's maximum health. So if your opponent has a load of little stuff and a Colossus, but the Colossus has hardly any health left, it will still mark the Colossus because it has the maximum health. So if this guy kills the Colossus, which may only need to take 1 or 2 hits if it's almost dead, he'll still get that massive buff. So 8 mana is pretty expensive, but if he is triggered, he's going to be very powerful indeed. Remember, the Marked for Death is a one-time only thing that occurs and it is applied on spawn. Right, so that's the new Revenant. We'll see how he works out. It seems like he can be good, especially if you can get him triggered. Let me know, as always, in the comments, what do you think about this guy? He is a new legendary. So that's the first and only new card, but we do have some new alternate master perks. And if you're not familiar with the alternate master perks feature, basically each master has different perks that you... So for example, for perk 1, you might have 2 different variants, and you can choose that either before the match or during the match up until the moment it unlocks. And the masters that are getting new perks here are Ravager. So he's getting a replacement for perk 3. So his perk 3 at the moment is the Terror Brutus. So remember, with the Terror Brutus, you get that big one-time only spawn, and that is it. It's a one-time only perk. You've got to try and get a lot of value from it, and if you can't, then it's kind of bad news. But if you can, then it's very good news. And you might wonder why I'm looking away. It's because I realised that I'm kind of overlapping this. I'm trying to move myself a little bit, but I didn't have it set up. Right, so Onslaught Codex is the replacement for perk 3. So you get basically a book, like Apep gets a book now for the minions, or Milloween gets her spell book. The Onslaught Codex is going to be a book. You get a one-use copy of the book every 30 seconds. And as we'll see in the balance changes, there's been some changes to the timers with regards to the book. And I'm not sure if this gets that same timer or not. But it's a 30-second cooldown. And when you use it, your hand is replaced with 4 random 5+ mana non-mythic melee minion cards. Each costs 2 less mana, and they gain rage. So basically you get presented with 4 options, and you choose one of them. And you get that every 30 seconds. So unlike the regular perk 3, which is a one-time only thing and then it's gone, this is a continual perk 3 that can keep on giving into the late game. So just a reminder, 4 random 5+ mana non-mythic melee minion cards. And so you get to choose one. It costs 2 less and has rage. Right, so that's the Ravager alt perk. And the second alt perk that's being added here is for Valorian. We know Valorian already has that second, the alt perk for perk 2, the Fervent Warrior, which we've seen a lot of. This is a replacement or an alternative for perk 1. His standard perk 1 is the Searing Light. The alternative here is the Holy Fire. So add a one-use Holy Fire card to your hand every 25 seconds. And what does that do? Holy Fire is the stuff you see on the floor that you get from Activated Smite, or from the Sanctum of the Cleansing Fire, or the Brother of the Burning Fist, which does 75 healing damage. Sorry, 75 damage and 75 healing. So that's the replacement for the alternate perk 1 for Valorian. Okay, next up we're going to have a look at the new cosmetics. And as mentioned, we're not unfortunately going to have a new skin. There will be skins in the Battle Pass. It's not going to be a new one. There are some new skins that are coming, and they will be in the future Battle Passes. So I think from next month onwards. So there'll still be some new skins, but only sort of 2 or 3. And I'm not sure if they're brand new skins or recolors, but we'll see. But there are some new cosmetics. So we have the new Revenant avatar and a new emote for Morelia. And as always, a bunch of balance changes. And as I said at the start of the video, going forward there will be monthly balance patches just like this, but with no new content. And these balance changes will be driven by the community. So the idea is the community has suggestions about what they want to be balanced. And then we have sort of a committee that gets together, sort of experienced players that look at all these suggestions, and they're looking at, are these changes needed? And are these changes doable? Because there's only going to be a very small amount of development resources available regarding implementing these changes. So they need to be fairly simple, not sort of completely redesigning a card, just sort of tweaks, balance, dials turned, stuff like that. And then once the committee has decided on all of the the ones that are appropriate and doable, then they'll get done. So, balance changes. What's getting stronger, weaker, or rebalanced? So, Bannerman. Bannerman's now going to spawn with a shield himself, as well as shielding others. I feel like he used to do this before, and then that got changed. It's getting changed back. Chain Gang. So you get 4 of them instead of 3. And remember, you get the Lancers, which are the melee ones, or the Darters, which are the ranged ones, if you've played a card within the last 5 seconds. Now, a buff for Denver. So normally, big units want to be slow and lumbering. But this is an increasing movement speed. But why is this good for Denver? Well, Denver, if he's faster, he can throw something, run quickly to the thing he threw, grab it again, throw it again. So I think that's going to be why it's going to be a little bit better for Denver. A buff here for the Frostfang Familiar. So when it's looking for a target, it can target the closest friendly minion anywhere on the field. So it doesn't have to be within sort of close range. Anywhere on the field, as long as there's a friendly minion, it can target. Even if it's all the way forward by the Master Tower, and you spawn something in the pocket, as long as it can survive, it will get back there. So giving it a bit more usability potentially, rather than it just sort of coming out and just wandering around and dying. Right, next up we have a move speed reduction to the Frost Feathers. So normally with these cheap range units, you don't want them to get ahead of everything. You want them to stay in the back line, have your tanks. You don't want these guys getting aggro, and that's kind of why their slow move speed is better for them. I think this slow move speed is also felt by the Frost Feather Flyby, which in that case will be a nerf to the Flyby, because remember, you can interrupt that Flyby damage with spells or ranged minions. They are targetable. Right, a cast delay reduction to the healing Fireball. So if your healing Fireballs have been missing by half a second, you're going to be happy. So the cast delay of a second down to half a second. A buff to Jezra. I think she had 750 health before that got reduced. She's going to have 750 health again. Kamikaze Zeppelin. One of the cards we see very, very, very rarely. And it has an awesome animation when it explodes, but unfortunately we don't get to see it very much because no one plays it. But maybe more now. Mana cost going down from 6 to 5. Lord Sentinel Thelic's always been kind of tricky to balance. He just gets wiped out for spells. So I kind of like what they're doing here, but I don't think it's going to change too much. So instead of being a 10 mana card, they're changing it to be an 8 mana plus 2 mana freeze. So it still costs 10 mana, but if you spawn it at 10 mana, it costs you 8, and you still have that 2 mana left to do something else with, which isn't really that many. You don't have too many options. You know, you've got a Glensbrew or an Armored Escort to kind of potentially protect the archers, because the problem is you spawn it and then they get Bear Valanched or Daggerfalled, and it doesn't help too much. The Armored Escort's not going to help much against the Bear Avalanche in that situation. If they changed it to 7 plus 3 mana freeze, you could then Black Hole, then it would probably be too slow. Just when I was reading this, I had an idea. What about this? Let me know what you think of this. So, this is my suggestion. If it gets support, maybe it'll go through. So, let's make Thelic a 6 mana minion. If you spawn him at 6 mana, you get Thelic. For each extra mana you have over that 6, you get an extra archer. So if you've got 8 mana, you get him plus 2 archers. And then at 10 mana, you get the maximum 6. So then you can choose, if you know your opponent has a Bear Avalanche, you can choose to spawn him on his own. Or if you know they don't have a counter spell, you can spawn him with everything. Let me know, what do you think? Is that a good idea? Is it too strong? Is it too weak? That's not the change, but that's my suggested change. Next up, we have a buff to the Mana Puff Madness, with the mana freeze going down from 2 to 1. So instead of costing 3 mana, it now costs 2 mana. And this kind of, I don't know if this is necessary, but all of the other puffs kind of got a buff when they removed the puff spawning restriction, where you could spawn them anywhere. So this is kind of just giving this a bit of love in line with the rest of the puffs. Net Blaster, damage going up from 80 to 90. So this is one of those things where it only looks like a very small buff, but it crosses some thresholds. So instead of taking 2 hits to kill Tantrum Throwers, Spear Throwers, Chismers, stuff like that. It now kills them in 1 hit. And also, it can now kill in 2 hits, things like the Blast Monster and the Boom Buggy, instead of 3 hits. So small change, but actually crossing some important thresholds. Now a buff to the Protocol Assassin, health going up from 350 to 419. Don't ask me why. Definitely a card that needs it. A buff to the Spiderlings, they will now apply 1.3 seconds of poison instead of 1.1 seconds. They're kind of the problem with them is they're not a very good bridge grab unit if they've got something to fight against, because they will apply a lot of poison, which is great, but they'll probably die before their poison kills whatever they've poisoned, and therefore they've lost the bridge. And I think that's one of the main issues they have. Storm Tamer, damage going up from 40 to 45. Doesn't break any thresholds at the 1 hit, but it can now 2 hit things where it would have to 3 hit things before. Again, like the Spear Throws and the Chismer as we saw earlier. So those are the buffs. Let's have a look at the rebalances. So I mentioned this when we talked about the Perk 3 Onslaught Codec for Ravager. This is the spell book, or the Minion book, the Papyrus of the Black Obelisk I think it's called, for APEP. So when you open it, currently the cooldown starts and continues. So you can effectively hold it all the way open until the cooldown's almost finished. And then you can spawn something and you have the book again immediately. Same with Milloween, and we'll see again that's getting changed here. So the idea here is that you open the book, the cooldown starts, but after 5 seconds it pauses. So it does punish you for holding the book open, but only if you hold it open for longer than 5 seconds. So if you use the minion or the spell with Milloween within 5 seconds, this doesn't change anything. The cooldown just continues. But if you hold it for longer than 5 seconds, then this will be a nerf. As we can see here, it's exactly the same with the Xanian spellbook. Not sure if it affects the Ravager one, and if it doesn't affect the Ravager one, then the question is, why not? Right, rebalance here to the Legionnaires. So, previously it was 5 mana for 4 of them. It's now 4 mana for 3 of them. But if you have Empyrean Army, which is 7 Empyrean cards in your deck, you will have +1 mana and +1 cost. So basically back to... +1 mana, +1 unit, and you'll be back to where you were to start with. You'll get 4 of them for 5 mana. Now, just to look at the stats, if you get 3 of them for 4 mana, you're getting 112.5 HP per mana. If you're getting 4 of them for 5 mana, you're getting 120 HP per mana. So actually more efficient mana-wise against HP if you activate them. And of course, if it's a 4-cost card, that means that you can get it from Perk 3 APEP. Now let's have a look at the nerfs. If you've been watching my meta videos, you will know probably what's strong, and Rekt has been very, very strong. He's getting a few nerfs here. So his Perk 1, Shadow Dance, that's the basic Perk 1, cooldown going up by 3 seconds. Same with the alternate Perk 1, Gun Carter, which is where you get the Shielded Rekt, going up to 23 seconds. And his alt Perk 3, Mass Illusion, can only copy ground minions. Previously, it could copy all minions, and that was really problematic. People were using it with Bats, Frostfeather, Flyby, getting a lot of value. So that is not something that's going to continue. Next, we see a nerf to the Squeak Attack, alt Perk 2 for Ratbow. And the nerfs we've seen to Ratbow recently have been specifically towards 2v2, where the Squeak Attack doesn't affect your teammates. But this is one that will affect solos and 2v2. So his Squeak Attack has a cooldown. So you'll still get the scrats, but you'll only get the Squeak Attack scrat, which is the burrowed one and the extra damage one, every 5 seconds. So as the match goes on, as things get faster and faster, especially at the end game in Mana Frenzy, you'll definitely feel this nerf. And we mentioned about how strong Bats were with the Rekt Mass Illusion. Not only is the Mass Illusion getting nerfed, so are the Bats. Their duration going down to 5 seconds from 6, so less time to spend your mana and generate bats. And we've got quite a few nerfs here to some monkeys, which people were kind of surprised about, not sure if they were necessary or not, and don't know the driving factor behind it. We used to have things where the devs would tell us these cards were sort of overtuned, overperforming, but I'm not sure why. This is not something we see too often. So Battle She-How, damage going down from 75 to 70. And the threshold that this really hits is the 2-hit threshold. So a lot of units have 150 health, whereas now this guy's going to take 3 hits instead of 2 hits to hit them. So things like the Legionnaires, Assassin, Annihilator, stuff like that. So against a lot of those, that extra hit for every one of those minions really makes this guy a lot less efficient, even if it's only 5 damage that he's losing. Disruptor Puff, mentioned earlier about how Puff's got the buff with the placement restriction being lifted. Now the Disruptor Puff only gets to stun for 1 second. Feng the Wanderer also getting the damage 75 down to 70 nerf. Haunting Hugger. So Haunting Hugger does 2 things. Instant damage when it hugs, and it applies the curse. The nerf here is for the hug damage, going down from 100 to 80, so there will be a few things that it can't kill immediately. Things like the Spear Throwers or Dragon Whelps. And this is another Puff getting a nerf. Healing Puff going down, the healing from 15 heals per second, or health per second, to 12 health per second. Illusory Dragon Whelp. So remember, you get one of these for 2 mana, or if you activate the Voidborn Wound, which is another Voidborn minion doing tower damage. It previously gave you 3 of them, but it didn't cost you any more. Now it will cost you more. So the base one is 2 mana for 1, or 3 for 3 mana. So still decent, but not as valuable as it was before. And another nerf here to all illusions. So that's the Illusionary Dragon Whelp, Illusory Cleaver, Mass Illusion, any other illusions that I've forgotten. Their AoE radius is going down a little bit from 2.5 to 2. So reminder, Illusion does, I think it's like a third of the base damage of the normal minion. Plus, it explodes for 50 when it dies. So the 50 damage is the same, just the radius is a little bit smaller. More monkey nerfs, the She-Who. This is the She-Who, which are the 2 big monkeys from the Jadespark Watchers card. Their damage goes down from 75 to 70. Karmic, getting a little slap on the wrist. Some people don't think he's very good, but from my playing of him, especially in 2v2s, and from looking at the leaderboard analysis, this guy is kind of everywhere. So definitely, I feel this is certainly needed. Another nerf here, this is for the Mana Puff. First mana generation is going to take 15 seconds instead of the current 10 seconds, and then 10 seconds thereafter. I don't disagree with these Puff nerfs. One thing I'm a little confused about is the Shroom Puff doesn't get a nerf, and the Shroom Puff is one of those that gets that immediate value. It doesn't give you this long-term value, but it immediately gets on a bridge, takes it, and generates a Shroom, which is very hard to shut it down. But remember, it did get nerfed, so you don't have the Zenshi Flow double Shroom, so maybe that's enough. But it just feels like it should take longer to generate that Shroom, because you almost have no counterplay to stop it if they spawn it directly on the bridge. Right, Nether Bats, their attack cooldown is going up a little bit. And one thing to mention is, with Nether Bats getting nerfed, that's also a further nerf to Bats, which is also getting nerfed. And remember, in the last patch or so, the Nether Bats attack was changed so that they will not re-aggro as long as they are continually attacking a minion. So they're definitely a lot less powerful than they used to be. Right, Void Altar. Health going down from 450 to 350, so it doesn't change anything about how it works. But with less health, it means it's easier to start shutting it down, make it to shut it down before it gets all 3 of its spawns out. So it's easier to deny a spawn now of the souls. And Windwalker She-How, again, damage going down from 75 to 70. So all of the monkeys of those kind of stats. Tranquil doesn't get this because it does less damage anyway. Right, so those are the changes, the balance changes. So let's remind ourselves where we're at. Moonstruck, version 2.9, dropping Tuesday the 29th of October. We've got the Season Pass, we've got the new card, the Revenant, and we've got the new alt perks, which is the Ravager Onslaught Codex and the Holy Light for Valorian. We saw some new cosmetics, the balance changes we've gone through, and here, bug fixes. Now, as I mentioned at the start, I think in the last patch we had a lot of gameplay bug fixes. This time I haven't got a list of them, so there might be a few, but I don't have a list of them. But the bug fixes that we're talking about are kind of the bigger picture bug fixes. So Xbox players have had problems making purchases for the last week or so. That should be fixed. There's been the bugged sort of corrupted deck slots where you have to change your master skin to fix it. That should also be fixed. So some sort of quality of life or important sort of behind the scene fixes rather than gameplay bug fixes. Right. That's it. Moonstruck. A lot of stuff to look forward to. And as a reminder, this is the last content patch. Kind of a sad thing. Will we ever see new content? Who knows? But a reminder, the game will continue as long as people are playing it. As long as the game is making enough money to cover the server costs. And the devs did mention they were going to be transparent about that. How much their costs are. How much the game's making. To give us kind of an idea of, is the game doing okay? Is it not? Can we as a community come together and try to raise some funds? You know, do we want the game to continue? I'm still having a lot of fun with it. As always, one of my favourite games ever, if not my favourite game ever. And of course, I approach it slightly differently, as it is my mainstream game. Streaming is my main form of income, so it's a little different for me than from just the average player. But I do still play the game a lot outside of stream. So hopefully the community can come together and keep this game going for as long as ideally we want it to. And that's pretty much it. As always, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button. It would be great to have you. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think about the current situation with Minions. Do you think it's going to go on? Is it going to die? Let's have that discussion in the comments. My name's Bad as a Fish, and as always, I'll see you again here soon in the fish tank.